Eric Burgess here, and today we're going to be talking a bit about distortion. To do this, we're going to be using Blue Cat's Destructor. It's a distortion plugin. They've got a lot of great presets actually that really demonstrate these principles. And I also just want to show you how to accomplish a couple of really practical goals when you're mixing or doing sound design. And so to do that, I have here a drum and bass track. Well, it's a loop, a drum and bass loop. And let me really quick first show you, I'm going to bypass this distortion unit. And let me show you the bass that we're using here. It's this squarish sound that's being phased. Here's what it sounds like. So there's not that edge yet. It's not got that punch that I'd really like. And also, there's a lot of high-end phasiness, which spells disaster for a track. In a couple different ways, depending on how you're going to write the rest of the track. So I'd like to remove some of that. I don't intend on using it. So I'm going to turn this on. Let me just show you the after. So I like that just way more. It's a much more interesting sound. It's got the aggressive edge and the high end's been reduced, but we haven't sacrificed the high end. Like, it's not gone. It's just been reined in and tamed. So we're going to look at how to do that. And also, let me come over here and show you what I did with the drums. So we have some drums. And if we play it, here's what they sound like without the distortion unit on. Standard drums. Let's turn them on and let's hear this jazz do its thing. So we're making the drums quite a bit louder, but there's also a great principle being shown here. So let's start with the drums. I think it's a more straightforward example. Then we'll hop over to the bass where we are doing some other stuff. Now, whenever I'm working on a sound, I like to start with a preset because someone else has already thought about some various large ideas. And I need to now take their broad preset and sort of narrow it in for my sound. So if we come in here, they have the factory presets, and they've got in drums a whole bunch of things you can try out. I don't remember where I actually found this one, though. This one's the hard clipper. I think this one I actually got from Basics. Yep, hard clipper filtered. So you might be going a hard clipper. Why a hard clipper? Well, I'll show you as we get going here. So first, you'll notice the ratio for the compressor and the gate. Let's look at the beginning of the chain. So we have our input, and we're able to adjust the input and output up here as far as volume levels go. We have a gate. We're not using the gate, so it's just 1-to-1. It's not doing anything. We have a compressor. Now, the compressor is doing a smidge bit of compression. This move is not significant, so I just kind of ignored it. We come over here. We have the heart of the plugin. You have a preamp stage, which is like what you use to prepare the sound for distortion. You have a destruction stage, which is where you distort the sound. And then you have a post filter stage, which is what you do afterwards. And the drums have a really interesting technique being applied to them, which is, we notice here the only thing we're doing is we're taking the bass down by 8.1 decibels. You might be going, why would you do that? Well, you want to do that because when you're going to distort something, you are going to be effectively running it through an equation that's going to do the distortion. In the digital land, that's how it's just an equation, right? Well, it turns out that if you have low-end content in there, a lot of times the low-end content is just way overwhelming. And as a result, the distortion is largely governed by the low end of your signal. So what's a really common thing to do is just take some of the low end out. And then look at this in the post. We just put it back. So we took out 8.1, we put back 8.1. So this is preparing it. This move's being entirely done so that our distortion will sound better. Because the distortion, right, is going to add in harmonics. It's going to add in frequency content. We don't want that content to be based around the low end because that's not the frequency content. We're a lot of times we're more concerned with feeling the low end than actually hearing the low end. Where the mid-range stuff, right, that's where all the interesting performance-y things are going on. That's where the distortion will sound a lot more pleasing to us. Now, of course, there are cases to the contrary, but this is very largely true. So that's why this move exists. So it's a really great demonstration of it. If you hit the E on any of these units, you get to see sort of inside. We can see in here we've got a wave shaper. In this case, it's a hard clipper. Now, this is a really cool wave shaper. There are so many more controls than like a standard wave shaper in here. Where I only want to show you a couple basic principles. So this is a symmetric wave shaper. Our sound, if our sound is totally silent, it's at 0. So you see how there's a line here and a line here? Well, we're at 0. That's why we don't see anything else. It's just 0 right now. As we get louder, our sound will move away from 0. Now this is a symmetric. You see symmetric up here. If we put not symmetric, we can have it do something different for each side. However, we want symmetric. So what's going to happen is, as the sound comes in, it's going to move away for the positive and the negative direction, for depending on the input, right? Because you have above 0 and below 0. And it's going to get remapped. So if we had if we had it mapped, you see this light blue line right here? If we were to map it to this light blue line on the background, I'm talking about like very light blue on the grid, that would be 1-to-1. And we wouldn't change our sound. But we see that we have this sort of green line and we have this light blue line. And this is going to remap the input volume to an output volume. I don't want to go into all the details of like what every single thing is and what it does, but that's essentially what's happening is we're remapping the input volume to an output volume. And this remapping is being done on the waveform level. So you see here we have like a sine wave. Well, the sine wave will become much more like a square wave if we run it through this process. Now our drums are just these crazy waveforms. And if we put it in, we can look at our input down here and observe sort of its range. And then we can look at the output and observe its range. So let's do that. Bypass it. So that's what the input is. That's here the output. You see that it's being spread out quite a bit more. It's being, so things that were closer to the center are being pushed farther away from the center. And so this for me is just a cool way to bring your drums up. It sounds really cool. I think it sounds pretty clean and it adds a little bit of grit. So it's not 100% clean, but that's kind of the point. It's this process. So anyways, that's what's going on with the drums. So we're going to stop there with the drums. Let's move over to the bass and check that out. So here we have a bass sound, and let's just look at the before real quick. I've already shown you the before. Let's just get a real quick listen to refresh ourselves. So there we have our input. So we come in here. I set it on the bait bass, you know what I mean? The byte bass preset. If we come in here, there it is. And there's some really interesting things going on here. Again, we have the gate and the compressor. These, again, are not important moves. Gates doing basically nothing. Compressors doing a little bit, not important. I'll turn it off to put it at 1-to-1. Let's hear it just to show you. And now let me put it at that 3.23 or whatever. So that's it. Again, not a ton. There is a little bit of makeup gain here, 3 dB of makeup gain. I don't mind that. I can adjust for this stuff after the fact. So when I do my mix and I move my faders around, you know, I'll take into consideration those sorts of things. So over here, we again have a similar notion of we're going to prepare our sound for distortion. We're going to distort it. And in this case, well, we don't have a post filter stage because we care about just this output directly. But this can be added and we can do similar things to try and restore what we took out. In this case, we don't care about that because this is a bass sound. We largely care about the actual direct output of the distortion process. So we take our bass, we remove it a bit for reasons already explained. Now the treble, we might actually boost this a bit. That could be kind of cool. The mid is getting a generous boost. Well, maybe this isn't generous. We still have so much more to go. But it's getting a boost. Let's boost the treble a bit. One thing to note here is if we go in E, we see we're removing some of this high end. And so with the treble here, this sound is not one that's going to be super important, but we're removing it. Like if I bring this all the way up, it pushes it here, But there is, if I go into the spectrum view and actually show you the spectrum, there's actually stuff up here that if we brought this over, it would matter more. Hear that? That's the stuff we're trying to take out though. So we're just gonna put this back. We don't want that stuff. You can keep it. So that's, if you're wondering why the treble knob didn't do that much. When I heard it, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about this. But there's the explanation. Now on tone, always turn the tone knob. There's just interesting things that can happen. So I believe by default, it was at 2.25. If you open up the preset directly, it sounded like this. A little duller of a sound. So somewhere around there, basically they move certain filters around and you get various sounds. So it's kind of nice. It's like a multi-filter movement kind of a knob. So it's always worth sort of checking those out. Find one that really sits well. Also a knob worth automating in your track. During one drop, you can have it be one thing, another drop, or maybe you have it morph musically. You use it as like a kind of vibrato almost. In this case, it would be a tone change, but you can be really musical with knobs like tone. That's why I really like these sort of knob layouts. Now, if we go over to the distortions, I have it at 4.9. I believe it was a little lower before. But again, very similar principles. We have an input to output. We're just changing it through this function. And that's pretty much what's happening. Like the bass is actually pretty straightforward after you understand some of the basic principles of how a wave shaper works. There is an interesting property of this shape. So if this is 0 and sounds that are really soft, right? They're closer to 0. Like where's a waveform? Let's look at a waveform real quick. Let me show you how important this can be. Let's get rid of this. And I'm just going to open this up in something we can zoom really far in on. So you see all the sounds move around a 0 point. If we zoom really, really, really close into these soft sounds, we see they also move around 0, right? So you're saying, okay, that's like, so my point is even these like high frequency, so if it's really high frequency, it actually doesn't quite reach 0 if it's too soft. I guess this is more based on amplitude, not frequency. So if it's too soft, it doesn't make a big enough dent in the waveform. But we could see these larger waves coming through, and we see these little superimposed high stuff coming along with it. And when we do something like a wave shape, and we look in here, this is the wrong one, like a wave shape, and we look in here, this middle zone, the soft, when we go negative and positive, we are stretching this on the output like a ton. It's like a straight line right there. So this is going to be, they're going to be pushed out a lot. And this is responsible for all kinds of classic distortion sounds. And one reason why wave shaping is a popular way of doing this, like, because hardware will do stuff like this. Because when stuff crosses 0 on hardware, like an actual transistor, you just get all kinds of interesting results. A lot of it is usually undesirable. But in audio, we're like, no, this is great. Look at how cool this sounds now. But if you're trying to maintain data and whatnot, not great. You could really screw up your original signal. So anyways, that's what's going on here. So because this line's a lot more violent, as far as it being like, it's a lot more edged there, this can be a really cool effect to have on your sound. Now take note also, when we move the smooth knob, we change these transitions. Like look at this blue line. I've been pointing at the green line. I should really be pointing more at the blue line. But we see these edges here are now a lot more direct. This means that when sounds reach this level of loudness and they reach here, they're immediately going to change to a completely different rate. Suddenly they're not going to get louder anymore. They're actually going to start decreasing. They'll still be loud because this is still much louder than stuff down here, right? Look at where that maps down the output. But this is sort of important to be aware of. And generally, one reason why you want smooth, it tends to take these out. Because you'll have, if you do something like this and run something into it, you'll have a point that'll sound distinctly different. If your sound's repetitive. If it's something like a guitar, or if it's something like a drum, where the waveform is very, very complex, this is less of an issue. I mean, it could still be an issue. But if you have like a sine wave coming in here, there's gonna be some stuff going on right there. In fact, let me show you. Let's just grab a sine wave, put it into 25. This is a sine wave, right? Okay, there's our sine wave, and it's going into the destructor. Let's change this to be smooth, not at all. And let's move this to be lower and something like this. So if I play soft, similar kind of a sound. But if I play loud, suddenly it becomes much more squarish. And we can see that this actually responds dynamically, which is really cool. So we can look at what the waveform looks like on the output. And if I get just softer, this shape hardly changes. That's what I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Also, this wave shaper is like amazing. I wish I had had this when I was learning how this stuff worked, because these visuals are just awesome. But anyways, there's that. If you have any questions about this stuff, let me know. Subscribe and hit that bell icon for future videos, and have a blessed day.